That is James Mennie. He is over at the Montreal Gazette. And I guess, Jim, to be fair, this is a rather significant day in provincial politics and Quebec history. This is the final day for Francois Legault as the premier of the province after 8 years. How many years has he been entirely in politics? Is it over 20?
Oh, Lord. 95 to whatever when he jumped up. Maybe.
30.
No, I don't think it's 20.
Okay.
Because his career, remember, he left the PQ in a huff when it became clear. One, they weren't going to separate yesterday, and two, I think he had his eye on the leadership, and probably Marois beat him to it. So that was the thing. I'm sorry, I can assure you, I don't think it was 20.
Okay. Well, so let's look back really quick. This is the question I asked our audience today, and I'm reading a bunch of texts here. Not surprisingly, there's not at least not from Anglophones that I can tell, a lot of love here for him or what his party has done. But, let's take a look back. What do you think? Biggest failures, biggest successes?
I have to tell you that even as we speak, we'll get to Francois Legault in a minute, but if you want to talk about Francois Legault's legacy, you'll be pleased, or maybe not, to hear that Bill 9 was adopted today.
Yeah.
In other words, that means... And before you get excited, folks, no, the riot squad is not going to go in and start cracking heads tomorrow for the processions of the cross on Good Friday with all them praying going on in the streets, because it takes a month at least for a law, once it's been adopted, to actually go into effect. But this is it. I'm speaking tongue-in-cheek, but this is a normalization. This is Francois Legault, root and branch. This is Francois Legault. This is Francois Legault's Quebec. And, I'm sure you've met someone like that, and I'm sure our listeners know someone like that. There are people out there who may have this one fault, and it's been brought to their attention perhaps, and it's like you look at them, they can't help themselves. It's part of their, and even today, a moment when perhaps, and we're hearing, I grew up in St. Anne de Bellevue, and my parents were working class, but they still love me, and this and that. Here's the other thing you didn't hear in that clip that Francois Legault said today in the National Assembly in his last question period as Premier of Quebec. And basically, he gave three pieces of advice. The first was keep spending money on companies to increase Quebec's economy, because we all know what a great success that has been over the past 8 years. The other was to maintain optimism because, I guess he's saying that because right now, I'm sure all of his caucus and the CAQ are having kittens because they know they're done, they're cooked, they're finished, their careers are over, okay? Their party may well be wiped off the map. But by God, Aaron, the second piece of advice he gave, and this is where the guy can't help it, he's talking about, the decline of French, once again, and he's saying, he says every MNA has a responsibility to reverse this decline, okay? But here's the money quote, boy. It's true that with new arrivals, our nation is evolving, but we have the right to want Quebec to stay Quebec. We have that right. Now, I'll count to three and then say, what in the hell does that mean? Or do you want to just fill in the blanks there? Who exactly was Francois Legault talking to when he said, we have the right to want Quebec to stay Quebec? And what the hell does Quebec mean these days? Is he talking about Quebec from 1956? Is he talking about Quebec from when he was growing up in St. Anne de Bellevue? Or is this guy who, quite frankly, took a leaf from the playbook of the Harper Conservatives? Political adversaries are not adversaries; they're enemies. If you disagree with the regime, if you disagree with this party, you are against Quebec. When I'll never forget when no less a personage than Paul St. Pierre Plamondon, head of the PQ in the National Assembly, is saying, well, the Quebec Court of Appeal upheld the right of asylum seekers to send their kids to daycares, and in the National Assembly, the Premier of Quebec said, you are going to basically take the word, the judgment of a bunch of federally appointed judges and crawl on your belly before Ottawa. And this is the tone of Francois' political rhetoric. This is what he brought to politics in Quebec. This is what he did to Quebec over the past 8 years. He created a situation where discrimination was legislated. It's become normal in Quebec to discriminate against people, and the whole issue of the normalcy of that is being debated before the Supreme Court even as we speak. The only reason he's leaving office, and he and his party are perhaps the least popular government in the history of Quebec, is because even though they sent him into office with a supermajority for a second term, he double-crossed them all with this ridiculous bridge project between Quebec City and Lévis, and things snowballed, and people began paying attention to what this government was and wasn't doing, and discovered, you know what? These guys don't have a clue. These guys can't do anything. And the only legacy that Francois Legault leaves behind, apart from the pettiness and the discrimination and the finger-pointing, and it's always someone else's fault. It's not our fault. It's somebody else's fault, usually somebody who doesn't look or sound like us folks, okay? That's the legacy that he leaves behind. And for Quebecers to have finally turned around and figured out that these guys are not at all what they seem to be, I think is long overdue. But the question now, Aaron, is how long is it going to take to undo the damage that Francois Legault and his coterie of potted plants masquerading as a political caucus have done to Quebec? And we can only hope that, by the third week of October, we're going to have some indication as to which way we're going, because right now, it's winner take it all. And the most outrageous things, as the quote I just gave you right now, in his farewell to the National Assembly, we have a right to want Quebec to stay Quebec. You know what? That guy's been playing with fire for the past 8 years. And I'm really hoping between now and the time he very deservedly disappears from the public eye that nobody gets burned.
Okay. Jim, I would ask, is there anything in your estimation positive over the past 8 years with him as premier? What would you
derive from what I've just said? No, nothing. Absolutely nothing. The guy came in, the guy conned his way into power saying we're a third way, we're going to take Quebec away from that 50-year-old dichotomy of separatism versus federalism. And what happened? It turns out he's nothing more than a separatist, too cowardly to call a referendum. He turned around. He basically stomped on fundamental religious freedoms. He stomped on the linguistic freedoms that we supposedly enjoy in Quebec. On linguistic minorities. He made that normal. And if you disagree with it, guess what? You're against Quebec. You hate Quebec. You're not part of the nation. Well, guess what? Okay? This guy is being unceremoniously drop-kicked out of office. And for a guy like Francois Legault to stand up after he and his government have basically ravaged Quebec's education system and turn around, and remember they campaigned in the first term as the education government, and turn around and repeat the importance of education, even though on Francois Legault's watch, very many Francophone students can't speak French, can't write French, can't do a dictée. They can't. They're illiterate. And then they complain, wow, it's les Anglais, it's the culture. No. It's because your education system is garbage. All right? Because you're so busy pointing fingers at people who don't look like you and blaming them for your problems that you've been able to get a hall pass not to do your job. Let's hope whoever is Premier of Quebec, after the October election, Aaron, at least realizes there is a tremendous amount of damage control to be done to the very fundamental fabric of Quebec society. Never mind the decline of French, never mind identity. Francophones aren't worried about that right now. Francophones want where they live, whether they call it a province or a nation or just chez nous, to work. And right now, it ain't working.
But Jim, when I asked this question, and I'm going to bring it up again, the first time around after 2 o'clock, a couple of people brought it up, and I see it in the cup. Jim, he got us through the pandemic, they say.
Well, you handed out checks, right? There's a lot of people who didn't get through the pandemic there, Aaron. They were in special, the long-term care homes. And we didn't hear about that until after Aaron Durfell of the Montreal Gazette, or as Francois Legault referred to him as Aaron, what's his name?
Yeah. Who
pointed out the breathtaking incompetence and indifference and simple. You know what? Incompetence is the one word that comes back over and over and over and over again. Don't worry, be happy. Oh, have a curfew, don't have a curfew, have vaccines, don't have vaccines, whatever. It was like he got us through the pandemic. I went through the pandemic, you went through the pandemic. Did you really feel the guiding hand of Francois Legault on the back of your head, Aaron?
It's funny you asked that. No, I didn't. But I'm surprised at how many people actually give him credit for that. And I said, maybe that's just because he was on TV pretty much every single day, and that buys you, that buys you FaceTime.
Absolutely. And if you're old enough, guys like me, and perhaps you, remember the great ice storm. right? And every day it was Lucien Bouchard and the head of Hydro-Quebec, and it became part of the ritual.
Right.
And the message was, you're going to be okay. Well, yeah, in the end, we ended up being okay. But you know what? So did everybody else.
Yeah.
Because the thing just ran its course. Spare me. I'm not saying, I'm not saying, and once again, if you look at the numbers, and if I'm wrong, those numbers have changed, so I apologize in advance. But our report card on the damage that was done by the pandemic in Canada was the worst in the country.
Jim, I want to read you one text that says, Aaron, Francois Legault did one thing. He united Quebec in one thing, their hatred for his government.
Oh, yeah. I hate to say it, but, here's the problem. Why are they set up with the CAQ? Because a lot of things that have driven me around the bend about the CAQ, a lot of Quebecers just shrugged and said, well, it doesn't affect me. What do I care? I'm sorry. I'm one of those square-headed, Anglo individual rights fundamentalists, okay, which may clash with the, the idea of collective rights, or as some say, the tyranny of the majority, as defined by whoever has to be running the government at that moment in time. But the fact of the matter is, Quebec, I'll tell you right now, Quebec is not the same place it was before Francois Legault was premier. And I don't mean that in a good way. Mm. And we're going to find out down the road, whoever's premier of Quebec after October, once the Supremes come down on these challenges to Bill 21, we're going to find out which way the nation of Quebec and the nation of Canada are going to go. Because really, it's not just Francois Legault. He certainly did it in the most controversial fashion. But there's a fundamental problem in this country about whether or not you or I, our listeners, have rights that are not subject to the whims of whoever happens to be premier or prime minister at any given moment. There's something very wrong with that picture.
Jim, we're going to wrap it up. I will tell you are right. Quebec had the most deaths during COVID. 18,000 people died here, 15,000 in Ontario. So Quebec, yeah, you're right, had the most. So much for Mono Francois, huh? Okay.
It's a terrible thing.
It is.
I don't want to make light of it.
No, but it's the reality. It's the truth.
Let's not turn around and get warm and fuzzy over something that, quite frankly, when you look behind the scenes and you see, and God knows our mutual friend, Aaron Durfell of the Gazette, really shed so much light on that. It was a freaking disaster. And we're lucky we got away with it as much as we did. But the fact is, and as for the rest of it, like I say, it even goes beyond that. You know what? In the same way as Francois Legault personalized and weaponized politics, I have never disliked a politician, personally disliked a politician as much as I dislike Francois Legault.
We'll leave it at that. James Mennie at the Montreal Gazette. Jim, thank you.
I'm Luke Wilson. Join me each week for Film Never Lies. Since retiring from the NFL, I've had a lot on my mind, and now I've got my own show. So if you're tired of lazy takes, if you want honest conversations, join us each week. Film Never Lies, available on all TSN platforms and the iHeartRadio app.